So we've discussed some of those things, and I've had people ask me questions about, okay, if America is in the process of blessing, why all the storms? Why all the flooding? Why all of this and that? It's opportunity. And it's going to take money to rebuild things, and it's going to take money to do things and rebuild the structure, and all that provides jobs and it provides income, and it blesses people who otherwise wouldn't be blessed. And so when you're looking at things like that, and it looks like, oh, God's mad at us, or God's doing this, doing. Oftentimes, it's just that God is allowing things to happen in order to bring a blessing. If you allow the circumstances that you're going through to be a teacher and to help you become a better you, which is what uh, is the reason for a lot of the things that we go through with. A lot of the things we go through with is just to help us. Um, a person who suffers much speaks many languages. And so a lot of the things that we go through with are really, in the long run, a blessing because they help fashion us into who we are to become. See, God doesn't see us where we are now. He sees what we're going to evolve into. And I'm thankful that He sees me down the road. And because we all make mistakes, we're all human. And I make mistakes, I'm not perfect. I'm glad that God can take an imperfect person and can use them to do great things. So don't ever think about yourself and belittle yourself and look at around you at all the chaos and the problems. Understand that when you see these things, let it be an instructor to you and you'll come through it just fine. Hold on to your faith. That's what really matters. So I wanted to just throw that in. So the Lord gave me a vision a while back. And I didn't quite understand it until all of these things started happening in our politics. Again, most of the time when God gives me visions, it's early in the morning. And He woke me up, and all at once I was somewhere else. I was standing on the east side of the Mississippi River. And I looked north, and I saw a woman coming, and she had a set of balances and scales in her right hand. And in her left hand she had a basket, and the basket was a woven basket, and her arm was through the handle, and the basket was in this direction, and it was woven. And she's walking down the eastern side of the Mississippi River coming toward me. And she gets to a certain place and she stops, long about Missouri, and she looks westward, and she said, "Where's the bread?" She's got the basket held out like this in her hand. She's got the scales like this. She says, "Where's the bread? Give me the bread." And people began coming and putting loaves of bread in her basket. And I was amazed at how deep that basket must have been, because they just brought loaves and dumped in, and it didn't seem like it was full. So she turns, the last loaf of bread is put in her basket. She turns, she slides the basket back up on her arm, and she holds the scales like this, and she's coming toward me. And she gets down around Memphis, Tennessee, and she looks westward again. And she said, "Where's the bread? Bring me the bread." And people began coming and dropping loaves of bread into her basket. She turned and she walked on down to New Orleans. And she stands a moment on the beach and she looks out over the ocean. And I'm standing beside her, looking at her and watching all of this and not understanding what's going on. And she looks at me and she says, "Follow me." And she turns and she begins to walk along the coast. We could see the ocean on the right, and we could see land on the left, and she begins walking toward Florida and toward the east coast. And so I follow her. We go through 2 or 3 little towns, and she looks at me when we go through one of the towns, and she says, "Look in the window. Remember what you see." And I looked in the window, and I saw a sign that said bread, $2.80, 90 cents a loaf. We go to the next town, and it was bread, $3.50 a loaf. And we get to the next town, and it says bread, $5 a loaf. And we get to the East Coast, and she turns to me. She looks out over the ocean for a moment, and then she turns to me and she says, "You can't follow me north. You have to stay here." And she turned, and I watched her walk up toward the north, up the coast. She looked like the Lady Liberty. She looked like the statue that stands in New York Harbor, except she looked like she was a living woman in a long flowing gown, and so this is what she looked like to me. I didn't quite understand it, and during the last 3 days, I've asked the Lord what that vision meant. Could be tied in with all this 7 years of plenty and 7 years of leanness, the sword hitting the ground, drought in places. I'm not sure. Hopefully somebody else, God will give them an understanding of some of the things that I've said, and they'll be able to build on to that. And maybe they'll be able to give a better, deeper understanding than what I have. So then the Lord spoke to me this morning, and He said, if socialism is allowed to take root in your country, in America, and socialism rises to prominence in the government will own the bread. And they will have a reason and a right to come down and say, "Bring us the bread." And they will have a right to set the prices. And they will own the land, and they will own the products in the land, and they will own you and I as part of that land. The Lord said if socialism takes over and the people allow it to take over, this is what will happen. And this was what was significant of the Lady Liberty coming down with scales and balances, judgment and justice, right and wrong, and demanding the bread be brought. America, stand up. Don't allow socialism to take over our country.